Right. My name is Gerald Mead, and it's a pleasure to be able to talk about my work here in the Hallwalls Members Show. A little bit of background: my work is small scale, mixed media collage or assemblage, often using materials, often sourcing from photographic equipment, using printed images from all variety of sources. And so what's wonderful, the Members Show is a great opportunity to be able to show new work, something that perhaps you've just completed or something you're exploring. But in a sense, this is actually a new work to an audience because this piece goes back to 2003. And I opted to include it in the show because it had been created for a fundraiser for the History Museum in Buffalo called Paint the Town. So I created it specifically for that event, and then it was then sold and purchased by a collector at the fundraiser, and so then immediately went into their collection. And so I never actually exhibited it. It was never actually seen. Fast forward 13 years later, that individual passed away, and I purchased it from their estate sale. And so it was a nice way to be able to have the piece back, but then also to represent it and actually let it be seen by the public. So, as I mentioned, I used found materials, I used images. This particular one uses a postcard of the Albright Knox Art Gallery. At the time, actually, it was the Buffalo Fine Arts Academy. And it is an old vintage postcard. It's a view of the Point Lake side of the museum. And those are very small, tiny details of it. So part of my work is very small scale, and it's intended for really kind of close inspection. The museum standard for viewing a piece of artwork is actually 3 seconds, if it's in an institution. So I'd like to think that by making it small and more intimate, it actually encourages a longer, more sustained viewing of it. So there's a little bit of inspiration, a couple of inspirations here. One is the fact that column. So often it will start with the image, but then I'm looking for other materials that will reinforce that and add to and sort of expound on what that image is showing, right? In a microcosm, and then how does that become, albeit a smaller macrocosm. So the column is out of context. It's pretty interesting, but it's actually just a cake top decorating column. That is a little bit of a takeoff or inspiration from another artist whose work I had seen, Tyrone Giorgio, who taught for many years at UB, photo professor, and he did a series of dioramas, and he used small little cake top columns. Also, to the column, which is a Doric column, is the same as what's on the back of the Albright, the portico that's on the back of the museum. The other inspiration is the 2 pieces on both sides, the background for that small image, and those are small samples of wood from a furniture store, where you could decide what kind of finish you wanted to get, walnut or cherry or what have you. And there was work by Robert Mapplethorpe that I had seen that used sort of this large planar square, and it was in a diptych format, right? And so I often gravitate toward works that are very symmetrical, right? That have a sense of order to them. But if you look in the details, in those photographic details, there's a lot of disorder in them, right? So they're very small, again, details from the postcard, but then I've added some random abstract marks in there, and then there are other references to, again, I'm using that image to riff off of and find references and other details to it. So there is a small letter set A that's in there that would stand for the Albright, and then giving you a sense of the era of the building, there's a small fragment of a postage stamp that's on the left-hand side. So there's a lot of components, a lot of elements in there. The other thing that I often use is I like to use materials that are directly from the site, so they become artifacts. So there's something, I grew up in a Catholic background, there's something called a reliquary, and that would be a fragment of something important. Could be from a saint, could be also from a cathedral or some sort of structure. So this particular piece on the right-hand side has a small piece of marble that's from the Albright Knox embedded in it. And you're probably wondering, well, where did you get a piece of marble from your white box? Well, so interestingly enough, at one point during the winter, they were plowing the back steps and they actually damaged them. And so there were bits and pieces of marble in the actual structure that were there until they actually got it repaired and restored. And so again, there's a lot of things embedded in here. An actual piece of marble from the building, a reference to the name of the building, a reference to the era of the building, and then by taking, again, the microcosm would be the capitals and the columns that you can see in the image, but then of course the macrocosm and making that large one in the center of it. So it's wonderful to be able to represent this piece, albeit 13 years later, which is, again, new to everybody except the person who owned it and me and the people who saw it at that particular fundraiser. I titled it Column A, so it's a bit of a pun on a Chinese menu. Column, obviously, it's column and A, the hallway. So that's my piece, Column A 2003 for the Hallwalls 2026 Conference Exhibition.